Stars
Podcast. This is the
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
Well, I was pleasantly surprised this week. AEW actually had a pretty good show for a change. And by that, I mean they had more than one or two good segments in a 2-hour time frame. And we're going to run it all down today on the Five Starr Wrestling Report. In addition to our 2 retro reviews on NWA World Championship Wrestling and World Class Championship Wrestling, we are here each Monday and Friday on YouTube and Rumble, for those checking out for the first time. Make sure to subscribe, click the bell icon to stay notified of all future posts, and also be sure to give the show a like and leave a comment down below to share your thoughts on what we cover today. Once again, a relatively decent Dynamite in comparison to the usual. I thoroughly enjoyed that little program this week. Now, perhaps that also could be factoring in that I'm in a relatively good mood for a change. Who knows? It's getting closer to summer. I think the weather's starting to warm up a little bit, so maybe it's a seasonal thing. It's hard to tell when you live in Pittsburgh your entire life and all you see is snow and rain and death from like January through mid-April. It's like you're already over it by mid-February. Anyway, let's get into this one. The suspense builds as we find out whether or not the Bucks actually do the job to FTR in the main event, considering they're actually white hot as a team right now. Or do they take the Hulk Hogan route and go, lose to FTR with 2 sets of championships on the line? That doesn't work for me, brother. But we'll get to that in due time. It opened with Adam Cole versus Christian Cage. Adam Cole, who they are still billing at 202 pounds. Call me irrational, I find that hard to believe. Nice to see Christian working again. You think a guy with the moniker Outwork Everyone would actually, work more than twice a year? Remember when Christian beat Kenny Omega on television? One of the very few people on the AEW roster to actually get a pinfall victory over Omega, who I believe was still the world champion at the time when it happened. I don't think Christian's worked more than 5 matches since then. Instead, he's just been standing in the background with the Jurassic Express collecting dust. And a paycheck. Good for him. It also may have counted for why the crowd was heavily favored toward Adam Cole here. There were a few Christian chants here and there, but my favorite spot was right before they cut to commercial. Cole whips Christian into the steps. They're trying to do the brief heat angle before going to the break. And the crowd is chanting, Adam Cole, Adam Cole. Grand. I did laugh at JR's line in here early on where he was plugging the main event with FTR and the Bucks. And he says, of all the tag matches I've called in my lifetime, including Midnight Express and Rock and Roll Express matches, I've never looked more forward to a match on free television than FTR and the Bucks. I also find that hard to believe. Anyway, despite the screwed up babyface heel dynamics, which are always kind of going to be fucked up in AEW anyway because of the cult fan base, I did enjoy the match. Despite the fact that we rarely ever see him wrestle, Christian's always great when he does. I see that dude doing stuff in 2022 that I don't think I ever saw him do when he was in his prime. Did Christian never do a top rope Hurricane Rana in WWE? If he did, I certainly don't remember it. Like, not only does he hit the top rope Rana, but it looks great in execution. And as frustrated as I've been with a lot of Adam Cole's work in AEW since he's shown up, some of it being the fault of his booking, some of it of his own accord, I think I've said it before, when Cole wants to put on good matches, he has the capability to do so. I watched him do it in NXT for 4 straight years, and it was always fun to watch. Some really nice reversals and false finishes at the end there. Didn't go too overboard with them, though, so I was all right with it. And what a simple but great little finish idea. Christian's going for the kill switch, but Cole locks his foot under the bottom rope, and in order to set up the boom, he just gives Christian the old poke in the eye. Good to see a finish without all the running garbage for a change, especially when it involves Adam Cole. We did get the Afterbirth deal with Red Dragon and the Jurassic Express getting into the ringside scuffle, as well as the Hangman Page Adam Cole confrontation. And it started off so well with Page coming down, snagging the microphone from Cole, gets in his face, tells him if Cole wants the world title rematch, they'll do it on Live Rampage next week. Which I was like, yes, thank God, a fucking Rampage match that I can look forward to. I don't even care that I didn't have a vested interest in seeing the rematch with these guys to begin with. At least it's a main event level Rampage match. Been complaining about that for God knows how long and how meaningless that show feels because of all the stupid undercard AEW dark level matches they keep booking for that program. So they gave me something. And it's going to be a Texas death match. God damn it, they were so close. They were so close to the perfect segment. And right at the end there, they totally wet the bed. Never mind the fact that it's another garbage hardcore match that I have no interest in watching. Did they not just do a Texas death match with Paige and Lance Archer less than 2 months ago? And they're already going back to the well with another one? I know it's the go-to in wrestling now, but I gotta ask, does even the most loyal die-in-the-wool AEW sheep care about hardcore matches anymore? If so, I need to ask why. Like, what are you expecting them to actually do anything other than the normal plunder match? Where they break out every gimmick trope in the book? Probably thumbtacks and glass. Because they're idiots. Can't you settle with a 2 out of 3 falls match? Would it really be that hard? So that whole thing infuriated me. But aside from that, it was a thumbs up opening segment for AEW, and I genuinely mean that. And they were actually able to keep that momentum going for a little while here too. Keyword, little while. They followed that up with showing a pre-tape of the Fallout to the Supercard of Honor pay-per-view from over the weekend, where Jay Lethal turned heel on Jonathan Gresham and aligned with Sanjay Dutt. Of course, that also prompted the in-ring return of Samoa Joe, which is a relatively big surprise. And, this all kind of tied into the next segment, so I'll share my thoughts on the whole Lethal thing in a minute. First, we got this Samoa Joe Max Caster qualifying match for the Owen Hart Foundation tournament. And I talked about this before when it comes to Caster and Bowens. Ideally, I really would like to get behind them as a team because I definitely see why people like them. Even if they're not particularly my flavor, they are very charismatic and they could suffice as a credible mid-card level tag team if they weren't booked like trash, which unfortunately they usually are. My issue with Caster and Bowens from the beginning has always been that whenever it looks like Tony's giving him a little bit of a push or they're starting to catch a little bit of fire, they either get pulled from television and they disappear for a while, or they lose. the latter of which happened here. And this was even more of a squash kind of defeat than anything. And the thing that sucks is that it was such a perfectly laid out match if the objective was to make Joe look like God. Like the exact kind of squash that AEW should be doing with every newcomer that jumps on board. Joe goes in there, hits all his big offensive moves, crowd pops for virtually everything he does. Caster tries to cut him off momentarily, but Joe quickly fires back and kills him with a muscle buster. I think the whole thing only went like 2 or 3 minutes. It was great. It's exactly what it needed to be. But again, if they want me to take the Acclaim seriously now or any time in the future, you couldn't find anyone else on the roster for Joe to kill? What about someone in Private Party or one of QT Marshall's goons? Again, the booking of Caster and Bowens on the show baffles me to no end. And I usually get a kick out of Caster's raps, too. The one he laid out here on Joe was fucking fire. Calling Joe a fat X Division guy and talking about when AEW was beating NXT in the ratings, Joe was the champion. Which, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think he was only champion for all of like 2 weeks. But, I mean, that's beside the point. But it's good to see Joe. You know, health-wise, I'm not sure how much time he's got left as an in-ring performer, but he looked good in there. Granted, it was very short, and Joe hasn't exactly slimmed down since we last saw him. But, you know, at this stage, Joe doesn't need to be going 15 to 20 minutes, nor would I advise it. But afterwards came the whole Jay Lethal, Sanjay Dutt, Samoa Joe deal on the Jumbotron. And this was an interesting little story they played up. You know, Lethal basically told Joe that he respects him and he would have laid out the red carpet had he known that Joe was going to show up at the ROH show. But the problem is Joe apparently only answers phone calls for billionaires. So when Lethal spent the last 4 months or so trying to give him a call, he ghosted him entirely. So next week, they're promising Joe a special gift. Or something. It is kind of cool to see Lethal and Dutt together again. You know, just as long as they're not doing Macho Man impersonations or try to get SoCal Val involved here in any way. I can get down with that pairing. The Lethal heel turn still feels like it came right out of nowhere with very little forethought or build to it. Would have been nice to see Lethal maybe rack up a few big wins before they decided to flip him heel, but you know, what's done is done. But this is a program I could totally get behind. You know, Joe and Lethal are pros. They know what they're doing. They can talk. And as long as the booking isn't overly contrived, it could be a solid TV feud. So they started off with a hot first half hour. And then they pretty much ran that off a cliff in a hurry. And considering there was no CM Punk on the show this week, it certainly didn't help their cause. The first lull in the program began here with this Blackpool Combat Club segment in the back, or whatever they're calling Regal's new faction with Danielson and Moxley. They're hyping up Danielson versus Trent and Wheeler Yuta versus Moxley for Rampage. The first of which should be okay, and the second of which I'm expecting to be garbage, because Moxley's garbage. And Regal spoke. Danielson stood there with his arms crossed like a complete background player. And Mox said something about blood. And it was dumb. Then we had Shawn Spears versus Shawn Dean. Oh, I'm sorry. Captain Shawn Dean. What is he the captain of exactly? I have no idea. I guess he was in the Navy at one point. Maybe he served as a commanding officer or something. I don't know. It was never explained. Of course, MJF was out on commentary again, and you could pretty much guess where that was all going the moment he came out. And I'll just fast forward because I don't really have a whole lot to say about the match. Shawn Spears was in it, so saying it was boring would probably be complimenting it. But we all know where it was going. And for the third week in a row, Wardlow manages to break into the building, once again unflanked by security and or police officers, He lays out all of the security geeks that run at him in a single file line. Just like last week, it looked stupid, and this week looked just as dumb. I particularly like the first shot of the laid out security guys, especially the guy leaned up against the garage door in the back who looked like he was masturbating. And as Wardlow makes his way out to the arena, he gets down to ringside and is finally cut off again by security. And again, no handcuffs, no pepper spray, no tasers, nothing. They just restrain Wardlow and he's taken to the back. Just like that. And all the while in the ring, Shawn Dean schoolboy spears and pins him. And I talked about pretty much this exact same segment last week when they did it, and I gave my reasons for why I didn't particularly like it. But for sake of argument, I'll go ahead and touch on a few points. First of all, again, Wardlow coming out through the back of the arena and trying to get at MJF by walking through the crowd. Why? Seriously, why? If Wardlow really wants to get at MJF, why doesn't he just come out through the entrance tunnel? MJF's right there. It's not like Wardlow wouldn't have a clear path right to the announce desk. Second of all, really? So we're supposed to buy that for 2 straight weeks in a row, Wardlow is somehow managing to break into the building without immediately being tackled by security or police at the door. He's just able to bypass everybody. If MJF is so scared that he had to hire personal security to flag down Wardlow for his own protection, why is he not just stationing armed gunmen at all entrance points of the arena? Or better yet, here's a concept. File a restraining order against him? Isn't that something a heel would do? Well, if the answer is because he's a heel, so he's supposed to be an idiot, dude, fuck off. Like, that's a cop-out answer. I mean, I'll concede that watching Wardlow recklessly throw dudes around is a lot of fun, but I still think they would have been better off going with the story of keeping Wardlow off the show for several weeks and then having Wardlow make the big return when the people were least expecting it. I mean, that's where I thought they were going at first. Because with what they did, not just this week, but last week too, all the buzz and the potential heat around MJF sending Wardlow home and basically paying him to sit around, I mean, it feels like it was all for nothing now. Kind of hope they got something more clever in store with this next week, because with MJF basically daring Wardlow to show up at the building when he wrestles Shawn Dean, if the whole thing is just Wardlow coming in and pouncing through security only to get stopped and taken out of the arena for a 3rd week in a row, I don't know, it kind of feels like we're just going in circles with this program when, keep in mind, this is one of the hottest angles coming out of that Revolution pay-per-view. There's a part of me that's kind of concerned they're going to drop the ball with it. And we got all the tomfoolery with the Jericho Appreciation Society and Eddie Kingston, Santana, and Ortiz. Starts with the whole footage captured earlier in the day with the heels and mid-brawl with the baby faces. Of course, no security anywhere to be found. Thought I'd throw that in there. And it ends with the bad guys all running off in the getaway car that Hager was driving. By the way, I love how Hager was just casually driving by the building when the heels were all running out the back door. Talk about impeccable timing. And of course, that leads to Kingston and crew coming out and running down all the heels on the mic. Basically, they're all essentially professing to blatant homicidal threats on live national television, promising that they're all going to kill each member of Jericho's crew one by one. And all the while, the entire time Kingston's talking about how even if Jericho is with his wife and kids, that Kingston's going to he's going to find him and beat the shit out of him. I'm just thinking to myself, why not just beat him up on Rampage? Jericho's doing commentary for the show anyway. He's not that hard to find. And by the way, what a great set of baby faces. Promising to jump dudes in front of their family, possibly putting the wife and kids at risk of getting seriously hurt or even killed. I mean, I get Kingston isn't exactly the kind of dude that you would imagine donates to the Red Cross, but still, kind of a douchey thing to do. Then, for free, on TV, for no reason, with a week's build, if that, we get Butcher and Blade versus the Hardys in a tables match. Because, why not, you know? Got Matt and Jeff Hardy reuniting together, probably for the last time in their careers. I mean, Lord knows they've got much left in the tank at this point at their age. Probably at the point now where they're more injury prone, and I mean, it's already risky having them work dangerous, hardcore, crash test dummy matches to begin with. So, you know, instead of immediately trying to put them in a high-profile main event level program with some of their top teams, no, instead, here we got Matt and Jeff floundering in a meaningless undercard feud with a bunch of job guys. Oh, and the match sucked, too. Go figure. Literally, I've said it before, and they've already proven my point. Tony Khan signed Jeff Hardy to a contract so that he could buy the rights to his WWF theme and get the initial pop from the crowd for the introductions. He had absolutely no vision or idea of what he wanted to do with the Hardys as a team. Which, I mean, Christ almighty, you talk about being a mark. How in the fuck do you sign Jeff Hardy to reunite the Hardy Boys and not know what to do with them? Aside from having them come out to Jeff's old WWF theme. Because that's all the people pop for. I mean, they go nuts when the music hits. And as soon as the bell rings, it's a fucking tomb in the building. And why would the people give two shits about this? They're wrestling Butcher and the fucking Blade. In a garbage hardcore match, no less. Like I said, the whole thing was pure absurdity. Okay, first of all, they eliminate Jeff Hardy first. Why, I have no idea. Never you mind that they never bothered to explain the rules of the match, that it was elimination style to begin with. Again, just another one of those stupid AEW tropes where they just assume that everybody knows the rules ahead of time. So, after Jeff gets eliminated, after getting put through a table, well, there's Jeff, still out there, doing moves in the match. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, why was Jeff allowed to stay out there if he was eliminated? Well, the answer is, they don't know what they're doing. But the other answer is, when Butcher and Blade initially put Jeff through a table, you see, the table was set up on one leg in the ring, and when Jeff crashed through it, the table ended up landing flat. So even though Jeff broke the table, he didn't actually physically go through the table. So of course Excalibur, like the dumb moron he is, well, Jeff's still out there despite he was eliminated. I guess it's fine. And obviously the refs are too incompetent to make a judgment call, so yeah, fuck it, whatever. Jeff's still in the match, I guess. Beyond pure incompetency. And because no one bothers to agent these matches and everyone just says, all right, boys, go out there and try not to make too much of a mockery of our company, for absolutely no reason, this tables match ends up turning into a TLC match when the guys start breaking out chairs and ladders. Which then begs the obvious question, why not just announce the damn thing as a TLC match then? Well, the answer is they can't because WWE owns the rights to the TLC name. They probably have to call it by something else. What did TNA used to call it? Because they used to do these kinds of matches too. What did they call it? Like Full Metal Mayhem or something tacky like that. Anyway, I'll just skip to the finish of this whole calamity. So Jeff hits Blade with a swanton through two tables, one of which does not break. So Jeff actually ends up hitting the back of his neck and his upper back against it, which I imagine was a very pleasant landing. And it also should be noted that Jeff was presumably already eliminated from the match, so why this constituted the finish, I have no idea. None of it makes sense, just roll with it. And then after the match, we had Andrade's crew coming out, and I took a bathroom break. I don't give a flying fuck about this feud. I don't care about Andrade or anyone in that faction. And the more I see of the Hardys on this show week by week, the less I want to see of them. Which sounds like counterproductive booking if you ask me, but what do I know? We had Christian Cage all flustered about losing to Cole, so he threw down his water bottle and left. And then Jungle Boy cut a promo basically saying something to the extent of, Red Dragon, your win-loss record shows that you've done absolutely nothing in AEW to deserve a World Tag title shot. So next week on Dynamite, we're going to give you a World Tag title shot. Seems rational to me. And then Luchasaurus got on the camera and said, Dragons, dinosaurs, yeah. And I did laugh at that. And rolling right along here with the bad stuff, we get this Julia Hart-Hikaru Shida tournament qualifying match. And this is something straight out of the WWE playbook. Julia Hart comes out for this match with the Varsity Blondes. And she's smiling, she's happy, she's peachy, super pumped to be there. And they get down to the ring, and for absolutely no reason, completely at random, she jumpstarts Shida by choking her with her varsity jacket, and then she tells Pillman and Garrison to basically go pound sand, and she kicks them to the back. Again, why, I have no clue. She just, I don't know, decided she wanted to be evil here. And I have to say, if Julia's turning on Pillman and Garrison once she ends up revealing the red eye under the eye patch and that she's aligned with the House of Black, that's going to be the most predictable, drawn-out heel turn I think AEW's ever done, where everybody in the room had to see it coming. Seriously, how long ago was it that Malachi misted her in the face? I feel like it's been months now. And Julia's been wearing the eye patch ever since, but she keeps coming out with the Varsity Blondes. And after all these weeks, now only does she decide, you know what? Fuck those guys. I don't need them. Didn't make her wrestling any better, because it's still putrid. I mean, God bless the girl. She's pretty, but she sucks. I've been pretty moderate with Shida's matches in AEW, because I mean, generally her in-ring work is fine, and, you know, the stuff she's been doing with Serena Deeb has mostly been good, but God, even Shida couldn't carry this thing to anything watchable. And the thing that sucks is, I remember saying that when they announced this whole Owen Hart tournament deal, like, man, this would be a perfect way to kind of catapult Julia as a star. And even though she doesn't seem to have any close familial connections with the Hart family, I mean, you can't just make up something in kayfabe. Give her a little bit of a story or something. I mean, Christ, Pillman Jr.'s aligned with her, and I mean, his dad had close ties with the Hart family during his career. Figured maybe the tournament would have been the opportune time for them to kickstart something with Julia Hart as an in-ring talent. No, instead, Shida beats her clean, and Julia disappears entirely, so Serena Deeb can show up with a chair and threaten to hit Shida. But she doesn't, because, well, Shida has a stick, you see. And apparently in the wacky world of pro wrestling, when it comes to the drawing battle between chairs versus sticks, apparently it's a draw. No way Deeb stood a chance of getting the one-up on Shida when she's swinging a fake kendo stick around like a wild woman. Yeah, I don't get it either. There was some other pre-taped stuff in there that I didn't write a whole lot down about. one of which included Hobbs and Starks jumping Swerve Strickland in the locker room while Alex Marvez yelled for the cameraman to go. And where did the cameraman go? Well, they goed to film the brawl in the locker room while no one came in to break up the fight. Except Keith Lee, who joined in on said fight. Hobbs also got smashed to a gimmicked wall, and people in the background screamed out, "Whoa!" Yeah, that was the brunt of the reaction. Like, whoa. Careful there, guys. Wouldn't want to scuff the floor or anything. I need to find that old Drake and Josh bit of Drake on camera going, "Whoa, just take it easy, man." But then we got the big finale. The match we were all looking forward to. Some of us for more perverse reasons than others. It's FTR versus the Beta Bucks round 2. With absolutely no video pre-tapes or pre-match packages to hype up the program in any way. I don't know, maybe it would have been nice to revisit some of the highlights of their first match from 2 years ago. Maybe have the boys talk about the importance of the rematch and why it actually matters, what the significance of the AAA and Ring of Honor World Tag title belts are, as they were defended in this match. Or was I supposed to watch all that on the YouTube show? It was cool they let Bobby Cruz do the ring intros for this one. It is still very weird to me how they're doing this whole Ring of Honor AEW crossover deal. So far, there's like a part of me that feels Tony Khan's kind of conflicted right now over how he wants to implement the ROH style into his product. Like, ROH traditionally had the reputation for being the more old school sports-driven ring style, which is what AEW claimed to be from Jump Street and then quickly turned into WWE Light in every way imaginable. Now I think Tony's starting to try and bring the old ROH style to AEW without trying to step on any toes, if you know what I mean. Beta Bucks. And like, I mean, you even see it through him starting to bring in and feature guys like Bryan Danielson and CM Punk and Samoa Joe and Jay Lethal. You know, trying to keep the product modern, but, you know, going back to the well with some of those old Ring of Honor elements that made their product stand out from WWE and even what the rest of the independent circuit was doing back then. So there's something there, but I just think Tony's biggest problem is going to be figuring out how to fully present that without having all his indie mark friends get in the way of it. So, where to even begin with this match? It's been a while since I thought about that first FTR Bucks match from a couple years ago. Frankly, I was so pissed about the finish and the fallout to it. I was sort of trying to eliminate it from memory altogether just because of how disgusted I was with everything that went down. You know, evidently I knew there would be a rematch at some point, but, you know, when you factor in how FTR have been treated and booked since that initial Bucks match, I don't know, you almost kind of went into this one feeling more pissed, knowing that it was the loss of the Bucks that pretty much thwarted all the FTR momentum after the fact. And only now is Tony trying to reconcile that by actually booking FTR like a top-level team. No thanks to the Bucks' shitty attitude and all their concerted efforts to keep them down at all costs and cut their legs out from under them. Like, you almost kind of went into this thing feeling overly sympathetic for FTR, which, well, it surely reflected in the crowd dynamics. You know, I think Brian last really hit the nail on the head when he was talking about the fans' reception to Matt and Nick Jackson over the last, God, I even say year by now. There's always going to be a Bucks cult following no matter what. But when you listen to the reaction they've been getting, not just on AEW programming, but, you know, I even think back to hearing the reaction from the ROH crowd when they came out to lay out the Briscoes after that tag match. You know, that kind of heat reaction, that was a real blurring of the lines between the right kind of heat and the wrong kind of heat. And I very well could be wrong about this. But I think Brian's got a great point. I think the Bucks are kind of conflating the wrong heat they're getting with the heat that they perceive that they're getting. If that makes any sense. I'm trying to think of how I could explain this. It doesn't feel like the people are booing them like you'd imagine traditional wrestling fans to boo bad guys. It really feels like a collective drone of GFY level heat with them. The get off our TV and go away level heat. And again, there's always going to be... It's going to be hard to distinguish that with the AEW fans because, again, the cult fan base, it's always going to be there. But when I watched that Ring of Honor match and the Briscoes and FTR had that fantastic tag match and the Bucks came out afterwards and they tried to ruin it with all their super kick horse shit, the reaction that people gave that sounded more like a collective groan than anything else. Like, God damn it, guys, really? You have to do it now? Come out and ruin the segment after that great tag match we just saw? Well, of course they do, because the Beta Bucks ruined just about everything and anything they were ever involved with on this show. But trusting that FTR are professionals, and they have a style that works effectively, and they don't partake in the trampoline, fun-for-all bounce fest bullshit that the Bucks are renowned for, there was a part of me that knew going in that this would probably, at the very worst, be a tolerable Bucks match. Meaning they might actually have to be forced to wrestle for a change. I like some of the early stuff here with Cash putting on the Beta Bucks' dorky headband and mocking their pose. Should have wiped his ass with it too. Dax got it right with sticking Nick's feather band in his tights and then throwing it at Matt's face on the apron. I hope he pissed on it. And there's a lot you can say about the match itself, but the one thing I'll say outright before I even get into any of the logistics, if FTR are not the second or even the third highest paid sets of talents in AEW behind MJF and CM Punk, then Tony Khan should be ashamed of himself. These guys deserve 7-figure payouts for the hard work and dedication and professionalism they bring to the business. Like, the fact that these guys have the capability of carrying the Bucks to a match as good as this ended up being, that should say a whole lot. And I know that'll piss off all the Meltzer cucks out there, knowing I dare credit FTR only and not try to share any of that credit with the Bucks. But I can tell you this for sure. If the Bucks were wrestling any other team aside from FTR, guarantee you would not have seen this version of them. It'd be right back to all the nonsensical gymnastic stunts and illegal double team moves left and right we see from every Bucks match. And yes, we did see some of the usual stuff from the Bucks playbook. And I still think AEW refs are way too lenient when it comes to counting illegal guys in and out of the ring. But for a Bucks match, this is like watching them work a studio match in the 80s. That's pretty high praise. I actually physically saw Matt and Nick tagging in and out with my own 2 eyes. I actually saw them holding the tag rope a time or two. There's a novel concept. They were actually working over Cash and getting heat on him before the hot tag. I was even all right with Nick sneaking around the apron and kicking Dax off before Cash could get the first tag. We see it in virtually every tag match, but this one at least had drama that led up to it. And by God, dude, how incredible is Dax Harwood? Like, that fiery hot tag he got, that was one of the best little comebacks I've seen in a modern tag match in God knows how long. The stiff short punches to the heels, getting in those really great crisp chops in the corner on Matt. It looked like I was watching Ricky Morton in there. Everything he did looked clean, it was fluid, got a great reaction. I know I didn't touch on this at the beginning here, but even the stuff both teams did from the opening bell, where like the Bucks were going to try and go for all their usual cartwheel gymnastic fuckery, but FTR would cut them off with a pass and slow things back down again. Showing that they're actually studying the Bucks and that they pretty much know every trick in the book at this point. Some nice dramatic false finishes in there. Crowd got into everything. I liked when Matt and Nick hit Dax with the big rig, but they drew attention to the Briscoes using that same move from the Ring of Honor show, but neither team was really equipped to execute the move effectively to put the match away. It's a nice little attention to continuity. And they did a nice little angle toward the end there with Dax and Nick tussling with one of the Ring of Honor belts, and while the ref was trying to pull Cash and Matt away from the ropes, Nick inadvertently hit Cash with the belt, and then everyone was like jumping up in their seats because they thought the Bucks were going to steal the win, and then Dax was right there for a great last-second save. Again, the people popped big for that. And they went with a dusty finish there with the Bucks getting the BTE on Cash, but his foot was on the rope as Rick Knox counted the 3, so of course he waves it off and tells the Bucks that the match continues. And finish was awesome. Bucks going for the Meltzer driver, and I've never seen this before, but Nick tries to do the springboard leap from the ropes. Dax comes in, catches him in the powerbomb position with no struggle at all, and he gives him that slingshot powerbomb move. But that looked awesome. And then Cash reversed the tombstone and hit it on Matt. And then just to make a whole mockery of those two indie clowns, they plant Matt with the big old kiss on the cheek and then kill him with the big rig to retain the belts. And babies are thrown in the air. Everyone's so excited and happy that FTR retained. Maybe a better way to put it is the fans were relieved that the Bucks didn't win. Which are two very countering thoughts if you think about it for a minute. As I noted though, in comparison to most Bucks matches I review, this is one of the better ones I've seen in a long time. Maybe since the first FTR match, if I'm being blunt. I don't know, dude. I really wish those guys were capable of having more of these styles of matches because I know they can do it, which is what really makes them so infuriating to watch. We see that they're capable of just doing basic tag wrestling. Yet for whatever reason, they just have this devout belief that every single match they do has to have 10,000 flips and near falls and kickouts and dives and WrestleMania false finishes and everything that makes modern wrestling look phony and stupid. The problem is you got no one in the wrestling media that's going to tell them otherwise. As long as the moves marks are at the helm of what drives the wrestling business, and the normal Buck style of match is what you're going to get. It just takes a skilled team like FTR to have to physically pry a quality match out of those two idiots. Now, of course, we all know where this goes in the finale. That'll be where the Bucks get their win over FTR and completely thwart their momentum again because they're unprofessional dicks and they'll never be able to accept the fact that FTR are far and away the superior tag team, and they always will be. But until that day comes, I'll give this main event a thumbs up. Maybe even 2 thumbs up if we revisit this in a year and FTR are still at this level. One can only hope. So, yeah, what can you say about this show? Great opening 30 minutes. An absolute dreck for about another hour in the middle there. And a quality main event that exceeded my expectations. And they definitely turned it around at the end there. Definitely one of the better Dynamites I've seen in a while. It's still got its series of issues, but by and large, this was one of their stronger showings in a long time. And like I said, Punk didn't make a single appearance on the show. FTR are a phenomenal team, dude. Of course, I knew that when I was watching them tear it up in NXT like 6 or 7 years ago, but even comparing the Revival to the modern day FTR, it's like night and day, dude. Those guys are probably doing some of their best career work by far. That great match with the Briscoes over the weekend, followed by this one here less than a week later with the Beta Bucks. 2 main event high quality level tag matches in less than 7 days. Yeah, they really live up to their moniker of top guys. They're slowly becoming the workhorsemen of AEW's product right now. Bryan Danielson kind of held that at one point, but I don't know, dude. Maybe Dax and Cash are there to replace him. It's great stuff. Top guys. That's far from a gimmick. That's a shoot. And with that all said, let's see if the retro content can keep up on the same pace as Dynamite did. Moving on with NWA World Championship Wrestling from April 5th, 1986. And we start the program with a replay of the epic showdown between Ricky Morton and Ric Flair from last week's episode. And for those who don't remember, that was the angle where Morton and Flair brawled and tussled around the studio while Robert Gibson stood in the background being completely useless. Going to the booth briefly, we had David and Tony kind of run down the gauntlet for the night, including the official rematch signing of Arn Anderson and Ron Garvin for the TV title. Didn't take too long here for Tully Blanchard and J.J. Dillon to come out and start running their mouths about the whole ordeal. Basically, Tully said that Ronnie always comes up short when it matters the most, and he and Dusty aren't on the Horseman level. JJ says that Ronnie's been a chaser for most of his career. And then Tully reached into his coat pocket, gave JJ two round-trip tickets to Paris for all of his hard work and dedication to being a great manager. Wonder who the lucky someone was that got to join JJ on said Paris vacation. Probably wasn't Baby Doll. Can tell you that much. So then we cut to the ring for a Wahoo McDaniel Ray Traylor match. And God, was it horrible. It also went like 4.5 hours, which made it painstakingly horrible. I particularly loved the spot where Wahoo attempted to body slam Traylor, and realizing that there was no way in hell that he was hoisting this big man overhead, he just dropped him in a front power slam. Should be noted that I have put Bubba Rogers over on previous editions, but I don't think there'd be a collective disagreement that when you watch his ring work, even dating back to when he first started in '86, he was far from legendary big boss man status by this point in his career. Again, though, this was a guy that Dusty saw a lot of potential in. Even though he was greener than goose shit here, dude was still agile for a big man. No doubt about that. Wahoo won with an elbow drop. Following that, we had Magnum TA at the booth to run down... Well, I'll give you one guess. If you said Nikita Koloff, congrats. You've been watching the program for the last 8 weeks. And while he was running down Nikita, they showed some highlights of an Ivan Koloff-Rocky King match where after Ivan had won, Nikita ran in so the heels could do the 2-on-1 Russian chain beatdown. Obviously, Magnum was there to make the save, and they did the choke angle where Magnum tossed Nikita over the top rope with the chain wrapped around his neck. What I wanted to mention here, though, was that the segment here reminded of the recent news of the passing of Rocky King at the age of 84. It's not a breaking news bulletin or anything, but it was a story that surfaced in the last couple weeks. Obviously, Rocky wasn't a Hulk Hogan success story or anything, but, he was a guy that had some pretty good squashes here on the studio shows back in the day. Great body, great look. I don't know where he wound up post-80s, but, when I read that story, I was like, shit, man. Been watching him on these NWA studio shows, and now I'm reading that he's passed away. Tragic. In a match that I'm not making up here, this is actually a thing they booked on NWA World Championship Wrestling, John Nighthawk Coltrane versus Tony Zane. Of all the jobbers to put this guy in the ring with. I will say that I expected a lot worse than what I got. The only positive I can give it is that it was mercifully short and harmless, although there is a sadistic part of me that would have actually liked to see them go 10 minutes. But tell you, they were really trying to run with Nighthawk here in 86. I was very young around this time, so the whole Nighthawk run in the NWA has kind of slipped my mind. I think he did some brief stuff with the Paul Jones Army, which sounds fucking atrocious. Oh God, I hope they book in a match with Tijo Khan. Now that is a train wreck that I would die to see air on NWA TV. But, like I said, they're booking him on the show for promos. He's engaging with some of the bigger names around this point. They're booking him in matches, so clearly they saw something in the guy. I'm yet to figure out what that it factor exactly was, but I don't know, maybe I'll be surprised in the coming weeks. Or maybe not. We had gorgeous Jimmy Garvin and Precious at the booth for a promo. And Jimmy's got depressing, saddening news for us this evening. Not the least of which was him making fun of Wahoo's obnoxiously big nose. But the heartbreaking news is that Wahoo McDaniel allegedly has swamp fever. And as we all know at this point, Jimmy Garvin does not wrestle diseased and dirty people on this show. So that match is going to be put on the back burner for the time being until he receives a personal doctor's note from Wahoo that clears him of disease and filth. Have I ever mentioned how fucking awesome this Jimmy Garvin fellow was? Guess I haven't put that over enough, but yeah, he was amazingly great. We had a Ragin' Bull promo. He spoke in Spanish, and I had no idea what he said. And then he beat Bob Owens in a squash, and I was bored to tears. I did, however, laugh at the spot where Manny was cranking on Owens' ankle on the mat, and while Owens was leaning up trying to break free, Manny was backhanding him across the face with the hardest slaps you've ever heard. But boy, you want to talk about a guy that just exists on these NWA shows right now? Manny Fernandez is pretty high up on that list. Have they done anything with this guy in 1986? The finish was also great, as Manny hits the flying burrito off the ropes, and there's one single audience member that just bellows out, "Taco." I peed myself, I laughed so hard. At first I thought it was David, but then I remembered that the move was called the flying burrito, and David wouldn't have fucked that up. So then I went back and rewound it. Turns out it wasn't David's voice, so it made it even more epic on playback. We had Wahoo McDaniel respond to Garvin's promo from earlier, essentially letting him know that if Garvin beats him, then he deserves to be at the top of the mountain. Ronnie Garvin tried to do a white meat American-style babyface promo, which sounded about as forced as a guy trying to squeeze out a turd with constipation. His first lines were something along the lines of, "I'm proud to be an American," and the only thing I could think was, could this man try any harder to force feed cheers from the crowd? Anyway, he mentioned something about the Crockett Cup, and as per usual with Ronnie, he will have a thought going in his mind, and then his promos just kind of peter out unceremoniously without any kind of cadence to it. He's mentioning something about the Crockett Cup, and then he just kind of stops mid-sentence and walks off, and Tony's like, all right then. Probably thinking, we're letting this man continue to cut promos on our shows weekly. Why? Good question. Ivan Koloff wrestled Gene Ligon. We were also told here that Ivan is still 1/3 of the 6-man tag team champions, even though we have not seen Crusher on this program since January, I believe, and Nikita hasn't wrestled in weeks, and still refuses to wrestle on television in kayfabe. Didn't the NWA have rules regarding champions having to defend their belts within a 30 or 60-day window without being stripped of the belts? Do the six-man titles just not count? Anyway, they did some stuff. Gene worked over Ivan after he missed a diving knee drop. And eventually, Ivan dodged a running clothesline in the corner, dumped Ligon to the outside. Nikita hit him in the back with a chain. And then Ivan just hit a knee to Ligon's stomach coming off the ropes and pinned him. It is kind of funny thinking here that Ivan fed this much for Gene Ligon, of all people. If only he'd have done the same honor for Tony Zane. Up next, we had Dusty Rhodes and Baby Doll out. And Dusty was here to do another one of his laundry list of ideas promos, where he spitballs about 50 different things at a given time and doesn't finish his thought for about 49 of those ideas. The highlight of the entire thing was Dusty referring to Baby Doll's big bosom like two great pyramids in Egypt. And meanwhile, Baby Doll is standing there next to Dusty doing her damnedest not to laugh. And at the end, Baby Doll told Dusty that she was personally taking it into her hands to get Dusty the week off so he can rest before the Crockett Cup. What a great hand. Making sure Dusty gets a whole week off from competition while everyone else has to work. Dusty's still a babyface, right? At least in the hypothetical sense. Then we had Hector Guerrero versus Carl Styles. God almighty, you take one look at Hector in 1986 and the facial resemblance between him and Eddie is almost scary. I think one of my favorite matches with Hector to go back and watch is those old Rock and Roll Express matches in Mid-South with him and Chavo. Man, that must have been, what, 84, 85? I know it was not too shortly before this. But what a great duo him and Chavo Sr. were. Of course, Hector's also great on his own. Great old school, fast-paced style match here. I mean, this would have totally worked on television today. I'm not sure how much Hector was involved with the television program here after this. If I remember correctly, I think he would go on to do some brief story stuff with Manny Fernandez, but beyond that, I don't recall too much of Hector's work in the NWA around this point. Fast forward 40 years after this, he was in WWF doing the gobbledygooker bullshit. In sort of a featured match for the program this week, we had a six-man tag featuring Pistol Pez Watley, the Barbarian, and Baron Von Raschke versus the team of Rocky Kernodle, Brody Chase, and Bill Tabb. And yes, indeedy do. This was Pez's, I guess you'd call it, initiation into the Paul Jones Army. Also with Paul Jones debuting the new Army General attire, doing his closest impersonation to a certain authoritarian fascist dictator that I don't think I can mention on YouTube at the risk of having my video taken down. He got the mustache down. Now, of course, what makes the Pez Watley Paul Jones story so preposterous in hindsight is the fact that there was absolutely no rhyme or reason for the alignment in the first place. 1 week, Pez just turned heel on Jimmy Valiant for reasons, and then the following week, here he was just teaming up with the Paul Jones Army. I guess because they were feuding with Valiant at the same time, so they figured kill two birds with one stone. I don't know. The match was all kinds of the usual wackiness you'd come to expect from a Paul Jones Army match. Of course, Barbarian had to do the one-armed scoop slam to the biggest guy in the match, just to let everyone know that he's strong and powerful. I also love the spot where Baron and Barbarian went to give Brody the double Irish whip for the back elbow, and Baron tripped over Brody when he took the back bump. Splendid. We did have the spot where Jones was beating up on one of the job guys on the outside in plain view of Pee Wee Anderson, who just sort of let it happen without calling for the DQ. And in the wackiest finish I think I've ever seen in my entire life, Pez gets a tag. He starts to I think gyrate is the best that I can come up with. And then he hit a big goofy diving headbutt / flying elbow on Bill Tab and pinned him. The only thing that I think would have made this better is if they'd have put Tijo Khan in there. But don't you worry, because there was so much more to come with the Paul Jones stuff on this show. And it sucked just about as much hard cock as this match did, let me tell you. Then we had Arn Anderson doing a promo on Ronnie Garvin, promising to be a defending World's Television Champion and showcase why he's the best champion in the history of the NWA. Arn is a heel, ladies and gentlemen. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Meanwhile, the story is that Dusty is basically not competing on television in the lead up to the Crockett Cup because he needs to rest and prepare himself for the tournament in his world's title match with Ric Flair. Meanwhile, Arn Anderson is going to be a fighting champion and wrestle pretty much any chance he gets. I think I understand now why the babyface heel dynamics were so fucked up around this time. We had Jim Cornette interrupt Tony Schiavone's fan mail plugs so he could do a promo. Essentially just letting everyone know that until the Road Warriors beat the Midnight Express for the World Tag Belts, they're just two muscled up freaks with face paint, spikes, and nothing else to show for it. And right as Corny's in the middle of his ranting and raving, we hear the Rock and Roll Express music hit as Cornette begins to flip his load at the booth, realizing that he was cut short. Also, I can't remember exactly how this was phrased, but I believe Corny said something along the lines of his predictions of being manager of the year came true, as did his predictions of Eaton and Condrey becoming the tag team champions. So by him predicting that the Midnights were destined to win the Crockett Cup, he may as well be burnt at the stake like a witch, because no one would be able to figure out how his predictions kept coming true. So apparently Corny did his reading up on the Salem witchcraft trials. Anyway, I totally forgot to write down who Morton and Gibson wrestled. Wasn't even paying attention. All I know is they won with the double dropkick, and David Crockett pissed himself as usual. They also did a promo afterwards, revisiting the whole showdown with Ric Flair last week. But this was also where Ricky laid out the challenge to Flair, and based on the description on Peacock, it does appear that we are getting Ric Flair and Ricky Morton next week, which I'm definitely looking forward to there. And then Magnum TA killed Randy Mulkey in 30 seconds. God, what a fucking gig that guy had. Getting paid the big bucks to cut 60-second promos every week and then squash guys in 15 to 30 seconds with 2 moves. What an easy payday. Then we had the best thing on the entire show. A Paul Jones Army promo with the official introduction to Shaska Pez Watley. Again, why Shaska? I have absolutely no idea. They just decided Pistol doesn't work now that he's a heel, so he's going to now be referred to as Shaska. And it'll get over. Maybe. It didn't. Anyway, so the whole thing was Paul Jones letting us know that the Army is complete, and this is the year that they target and take down the legacy and career of one Jimmy Valiant, which I do believe is the actual backstory of why the group was formed to begin with. They just needed a group of dudes for Valiant to feud with as his career was coming to a wind down, so they went with the most quintessential cartoon-level mid-'80s program that they could come up with. This is like the Dungeon of Doom 10 years prior. Made even better here with Tijo standing in the backdrop behind Paul Jones doing his wacky 1,000-yard stare. I absolutely died at Pez's line here where he says, Jimmy Valiant is a yellow belly hillbilly, just like this hair is yellow. And he holds up Valiant's ponytail on camera. He also did more incoherent babbling and screaming, the likes of which made Nikita Koloff sound like Martin Luther King Jr. And right before they epically cut away, we had Barbarian cap it off perfectly with just giving a loud grunt sound. Okay. I'll just throw this in there. Yes, everything about this story sucks. It was infamously bad for a reason, but infamously bad does not necessarily equate to me hating it entirely. If I can get a few hearty laughs out of this story for the remainder of 86, I can tolerate this on TV. Bad promos, bad wrestling at all. So that was phenomenally great. And that bled right into Arn Anderson and Ronnie Garvin for the TV title, which was also great. I love the sign in the crowd that read, "Bust some gourds double A." Get it? Because his finisher is the Gourd Buster. And let the record show, just so you know I'm not hating on the guy, as horrendous as Ronnie Garvin's promos were, never said his wrestling matches were bad. Come bell time, that dude worked his ass off. Great stuff here with him working over Arn and tying him up in all kinds of pretzel holds on the mat. Obviously, the main story was Arn trying to stall for time and duck and dodge when he could. Coming back from the break, Tully was out there on commentary, which you could see from a mile ahead where that finish was going. I did like his line in there after Ronnie punched Arn in the face. Tully referred to it as a tremendously legal fist. What a phenomenal man Tully was. And they're going back and forth toward the end. Arn's trying to run down the clock. And eventually they do the double bonk spot. Garvin ended up trapping Arn in the abdominal stretch. And as soon as Tully ran in for the blatant DQ, I just went, fuck off. The good kind of fuck off, though. Not the, oh, that totally ruined the finish fuck off. They did the little afterbirth with the heels holding Garvin's right hand against the ring post so Tully could take off his shoe and whack it with the heel of his boot, signifying that Garvin will no longer be able to use his illegal knockout punch. So that segment was all well and good. Back out of the booth was Jim Cornette for another promo, this time mostly centered around the Rock and Roll Express. I did laugh at the beginning of the promo here where, as Corny's trying to do his heat promo on Gibson and Morton, there's Tony visibly looking at his format, not even paying attention. Tony was very good at the subtle things. I can attest to that. And that led into the main event of the Midnight Express taking on Denny Brown and Mike Samani. And there was a great little matchup in the early goings there. Denny Brown and Bobby Eaton. Denny Brown, who I believe was still technically the junior heavyweight champion here. By the way, did I hear correctly Jim say that his mother can pull more strings than Harpo Marx? Was that actually a line? I'm honestly surprised that they never just had an outright censor machine anytime Corny came out to try and talk on this show. I could just imagine Jim trying to do these kinds of promos in 2022. Like, the whole screen would just say, censored for your own protection, and then we just see the old technical difficulty color bars from the good old days of television. Eaton ended up giving Samani the top rope knee drop, and then Condrey ended up hitting the stroke on Samani for the pin. And we closed out the show with a quick call-off promo, where Nikita vowed that with his 22-inch neck and great conditioning, he was going to hurt and destroy Magnum TA. There was also something hilarious about hearing Ivan simultaneously run down Magnum with a heat promo, while also explaining the rules and regulations of the Russian chain match. As Nikita drags your lifeless body around the ring, touching all four corners consecutively. I think it was him using the word consecutively that got me. And it capped off as all legendary NWA promos do, where Ivan's in the middle of ranting when Tony says, "We're out of time, see you next week." And then as they cut to the credits, Ivan goes, "What do you mean we're out of time? I've got more to say." And it's To be continued with Ivan and whatever he had to say to Magnum. I can't imagine it was anything noteworthy. Fine little show, though, especially the last half hour or so. Again, the Paul Jones Army stuff is notoriously horrible, but God, was it entertaining to watch this stuff play out on the show. Obviously, the Arn and Ronnie TV title match was good, despite the lame-ass DQ finish. And I'm really looking forward to next week's show, especially when they're doing that Ricky Morton-Ric Flair rematch. Should be a good one. And still technically a couple weeks out from the 86 Crockett Cup. Again, I do plan on reviewing that show, at least the marquee main event matches. I'll probably skip over the prelim material, but yeah, that'll be a fun show to go back and watch. So keep posted for that one. That'll probably tie in with the weekend show, and then we'll review it for the following Monday podcast. And moving right along here to World Class Championship Wrestling from April 9th, 1983. Pretty big show this week. Got to see a Ric Flair match on World Class this week against Kevin Von Erich for the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship, which was certainly a match straight out of the old school 80s playbook, pretty much down to the core. We also had the stick match between Kabuki and Yatsu, and suffice to say that was very weird. Overall, though, this was good because this was another week where they put some of the Freebirds Von Erich story on the back burner and tried to dedicate the program to other feuds, and I was very appreciative of that. So we had Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin and Mike Bond in the opener here. That was preceded with David Von Erich doing a promo, challenging Garvin to a rematch for his Texas Heavyweight Championship. This is an awesome little pre-match angle. Garvin getting in that cheap shot on David to knock him out of the ring, and while David's trying to get at him, there's Garvin doing the old heel Hardy laugh in the ring, standing there going, "I was just minding my own business. I did nothing wrong." The match was uninspiring, but that was to be expected considering you had Mike Bond in there. Garvin was as usual awesome himself. No surprise there. I like the story they were playing up here where Garvin kept lifting Bond's shoulders off the mat, and Bronco Lubick was admonishing him saying, "You do that one more time, Garvin, you're done." So, of course, Garvin did it twice more, and Lubick did not call for the bell. I also laughed at the sequence where Garvin pulled Bond down to the mat by his hair, and Garvin tried to cover it up by saying, "I used my muscles." Awesome heel line. Garvin ended up going over with the swinging neck breaker, and afterwards they had David run back out to chase off the heels, but not before giving Sunshine a good old spanking over the knee, which she completely no-sold once she stood up and just left the ring, but what can you do? But she had it coming. Why? She think David was going to give her a free pass after slapping him across the face? I mean, to be fair, if it were 2022, David would probably get hit with a harassment charge for putting his hands on a woman's ass. At least in 1983, this kind of stuff was not seen as derogatory. But, yeah, that was a little fun opener. Following that, we had a quick set of promos from Kevin Von Erich and Ric Flair to hype up the world title main event. Really not a whole lot to their promos, believe it or not. It was certainly not a Ric Flair promo circa 1986 on NWA World Championship Wrestling. There was nothing to be spoken of when it came to screwing girls from the Nature Boy here. No mention of Space Mountain. Almost kind of forgot what a normal stern Ric Flair promo sounds like. It's been so long since I've heard one. Next match was Iceman King Parsons versus Michael Hayes. It was pretty short. Parsons threw Hayes around for a little bit, gave him a couple drop kicks, and then Hayes whipped Parsons off the ropes. Parsons tried for a crossbody dive, and then Hayes rolled through and used his feet on the ropes to pin Parsons. And Hayes did a post-match promo where he vowed that he was going to start branding people in world class. Sounds painful. Again, though, yeah, I like that they're taking this week to try and visit some fresher programs. Obviously this one stemmed from the previous episode where Parsons slapped Hayes across the face, so the story going in here was that Hayes was trying to teach the Iceman a lesson in respect. Pretty simple stuff. This is also the week where we found out why Jimmy Garvin is always so gorgeous. I mean, it's in the name. May as well get a demonstration as to what makes Jimmy gorgeous. So we cut to Bill Mercer interviewing Garvin at a salon while he's getting a manicure and getting his hair trimmed. And by that, I mean the barber was just running her hands through Garvin's hair with a comb. She had clippers, but I don't believe she ever used them at any point. It was certainly wacky 1980s wrestling. That is for sure. I just love the concept that they dedicated an actual skit on this show to explaining why Jimmy Garvin is gorgeous. I mean, when you think about it on the surface, it makes all the sense in the world. I kind of wish AEW would be doing these kinds of vignettes with some of their guys that have gimmicks attached to their names. Could have done that with Shawn Dean this past episode. Explain why he's the Captain Shawn Dean. But even looking at a bigger star or somebody higher up on the pecking order, can you imagine if they did something like this with Ethan Page? He goes by All Ego Ethan Page, but I don't think they've ever actually explained what makes him all ego. Even something as subtle as a 30 or 60 second pre-tape or video package where he's just doing pompous, arrogant shit on camera and being smug during his promos to establish why he calls himself all ego. I don't know. Just some food for thought. The problem with AEW is they just presume that everybody already knows why guys have gimmicks attached to their names to begin with, so they feel they never need to go out of their way to explain it. Why is Keith Lee limitless? What makes him limitless? I don't know, he just calls himself that. And I guess we're supposed to take it at face value. So then we get the kendo stick match with the Great Kabuki and Tolayatsu. Interesting rules for the match, even though I don't think they were explained particularly thoroughly. Basically, there was one stick in the ring, and the object was to hit your opponent and knock them out of the ring so they couldn't beat the 10 count. And, well, it was rather underwhelming, considering the hype and build they gave it. It goes 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Kabuki jump-started with a nice super kick on Yatsu. He whipped him around with the stick for a minute. And then Yatsu got the advantage. He hit Kabuki with the stick. Kabuki took a bump to the floor. And David Mounting counts to 10. And that was it. And the reaction to the finish was a pretty unanimous, huh? They even panned shots into the crowd, and people were kind of looking around in confusion, really? That was it? I guess they tried to sell it like it was a shocking upset or something. I'm pretty sure Mercer called it that later on the show when he was going over the recap at the end of the night. But it was extremely concise. Not very effective as a match unless they were trying to go for the upset deal. Or maybe they figured Yatsu's a horrible fucking wrestler, so they wanted to keep it on the short side just to get in and get out. A simple in and out procedure, to coin a great movie quote. And then we got Ric Flair and Kevin Von Erich in the main event. And this was not underwhelming, I can tell you that. It was certainly a Ric Flair match, bumping and selling all over the place for Kevin, making him look like $1 million. One of the angles they tried to play up early on was Flair giving Kevin a closed fist right into the nose, and Kevin sold it by yelling out, "My nose is broken." And of course, he's holding on to the nose and trying to sell it, but I mean, there's no blood or anything, so it's kind of a weird little angle that didn't really go anywhere. Bronco Lubick took some bumps here, though. The first of which was actually kind of funny because the spot was Ric Flair pressing Kevin off of a pinfall attempt so that Kevin landed on Lubich's back. And Flair was going to give him the elbow drop so Kevin would move out of the way and Flair would hit Lubick instead. But the reason it was funny was that it took him like 20 seconds to set it up. So Kevin's just kind of laying on top of Lubick like a dead carcass while Flair's prepping to drop down on him. It's kind of funny. He also took a big bump through the ropes to the outside. So, yeah, Bronco got his money's worth on this show. And, I mean, of course, this is basically the overall story of the match. While Bronco was selling on the outside, Kevin ends up dumping Flair over the top rope on the other end of the ring. And while Kevin's a house of fire on Flair, David Manning's checking on Lubick on the outside. But this was a strange deal here because while Manning is on the outside attending, he clearly sees Kevin toss Flair out to the floor over the top rope. And I kind of figured he was going to use that moment to butt in and call for the DQ. But instead, he slides into the ring, and then he starts officiating the match while Kevin's making his comeback on Flair. Kevin hits a big crossbody dive from the top rope onto Flair. We get the initial 3 count. And of course, people are all going nuts here. They're wetting their pants in hysterics that Kevin Von Erich just won the NWA World's Heavyweight title here. But remember when I mentioned that this is a classic by-the-book world title match? Back when the business knew how to generate real heat and fuck the fans over? Well, the faces are celebrating, and Bronco gets into the ring, and he reverses the decision because, well, somehow he had caught a glimpse of Kevin throwing Flair over the top rope, even though it was David Manning who had the clearer line of sight of seeing the top rope dump. Regardless, Bronco hands Flair the world title back. They screw Kevin out of the belt, and the people all chant, "Bullshit." Yep, classic wrestling angle right there. Giving the people that initial heart-stopping moment where they think the babyface overcame all the odds and won the big one, only for it to get yanked away from them and send everyone home with tiki torches, pitchforks, and setting cars on fire. One might call those mostly peaceful protests. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, Flair gigged for this match. Because of course he did. But what a great classic main event world title match. Of course, me knowing my history when it comes to the booking of these main event style matches, I mean, you could see the fucked finish coming a mile away. But boy, did it generate the right reaction. The only thing I guess you could say outright sucked on the show was that stick match with Kabuki and Yatsu, but that's mostly because it only went like 2 minutes and fell flatter than a plate full of piss. But obviously the main event was fantastic. Jimmy Garvin's material is always must-see television. And I like the Michael Hayes Freebird story they've been doing with the Iceman over the last couple weeks. You know, again, trying to keep the Von Erichs and the Freebirds preoccupied with some other stories just to keep the show fresh. Now, yes, we are apparently getting, I think they said Kerry Von Erich and Terry Gordy in some sort of handcuff match next week. So, yeah, they are going back to the well once again with the Freebirds Von Erich stuff. But I'll tell you what, if you can find a way to access it, or if you have the Peacock subscription, this is a main event I'd highly encourage you all to check out. Fantastic stuff. But that'll do it for this one. I'm still trying to recover from Mania weekend and all the wrestling I watched. You know, the funny thing, too, is I probably watched significantly less wrestling over the weekend than most people did. Like, I totally forgot there was an NXT show in addition to WrestleMania. You know, not that NXT has been doing anything to hook me on the radar lately. Unless it involves Braun Breaker, but when I also heard that he was wrestling Dolph Ziggler, I was like, yeah, pass on that one. I think I've seen enough of Dolph Ziggler and his middle school 14-year-old girl looking ass to last the rest of my life. But if you want to stay posted on future FSWR content, make sure to sub and click the bell icon there to stay notified of future posts. Also, please like the show and leave a comment down below to share your feedback. And stop back and check out the show on Monday. Take care, all. Peace.